The very first doctor, the first thing she ever said to me, well, Barry, my best advice is to go home, tidy up your affairs, spend as much time as you can with your loved ones. You've got about 3 months to live. And I said to her, well, I'm afraid you don't know me. And if you're not prepared to give me a little bit more latitude than that, I don't want you in the team. None of us plan to get cancer, but I also don't plan to die in a hurry. I was someone who just didn't fit the mold that makes it easy for the world. And I had to learn to do other things to make up for that. I didn't want them to see that I was failing them. I was so far down a dark hole, it wasn't funny. And by that person coming and insisting that we sit together and talk, and he just held me, that was the micro step it took to start building back my strength again.
Don't Be Caught Dead, the show bringing stories of death back to life. Here's your host, Catherine Ashton.
Today, I'm speaking with Barry Dubois, a builder, television presenter, and mental health advocate whose life has been shaped by lived experience, not theory. Many Australians will probably know Barry from his television work on The Renovators and The Living Room, where his warmth and honesty made him a household name. Over the past 4 decades, he has worn many hats: apprentice, builder, contractor, CEO, husband, and father. But it's his personal journey through illness that has most profoundly shaped his perspective. He was first diagnosed in 2011 with a rare blood cancer, plastocytoma myeloma. Barry's condition later developed into the incurable multiple myeloma in 2017. Since then, he has undergone extensive treatment, including surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and a blood stem cell transplant. Barry is now an ambassador for the Leukemia Foundation, advocating for better access to care and support for all Australians facing blood cancer. Through sharing his story, he encourages others to seek help and reminds people they are not alone, particularly when facing the silent pressures of illness, identity, and responsibility. At his core, Barry is devoted husband to Leonie and father to twins Bennett and Arabella. Today, through his work, The Art of Untangling Lives, he helps people navigate the challenges we often carry quietly, bringing empathy, insight, humanity to conversations that matter most. Thank you so much for being with us, Barry.
Wow, that's certainly a journey when you listen to it like that, isn't it?
I know we very rarely hear our life told back to us, do we?
No, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I think it's quite cathartic. I mean, we do this, as you know. You're continually writing a bio for yourself, and I think it's cathartic. Even that part of it, just writing down your journey, it allows you to reflect on some of those moments and think about how you might have done things differently, how you could have done things maybe better, and what good came of those things. And I think it's really important to hear that every now and then.
It is. But you've had some probably more profound moments than just writing your bio, where you've been forced to reflect. Can you perhaps talk us through what it was like with that diagnosis that you first received?
The first one? Yeah, it was a hell of a diagnosis. Interesting, fun story in hindsight as well, if you're interested. I was surfing at Christmas time. I think it was 2010, the Christmas of 2010, 2011. And I went under a wave, and the wave sort of clocked me on the side of the head, and I just got pins and needles right through my body. It was incredibly painful. And I thought I'd done a really bad injury. And it didn't make sense either, because the wave wasn't that big and it wasn't that heavy. I was laying face down in the water, and my body was in a sense that I'd never felt before. And I thought, have I done something major? Can I stand up here? Is everything all right? And after a few seconds, it felt like forever, that moment. But I stood in the sand and I stood up, and another wave hit me, and the pain was immense. I got myself to the shore, and I just sat there waiting for my brother and my nephew to come in. And I said, I don't know what I've done. I've hurt my neck. I can't move. I'm going to go home and have a lay down. Well, that was Christmas. And then in March, after going to physiotherapists and stuff like that, I finally got an x-ray. And when the doctor read the x-ray, she started to cry. She literally, she said to me, have you got family, Barry? I'd never met this woman before in my life. And I said, yeah, of course I got family. What's wrong? And she said, well, there's this giant tumor at the base of your brain there. It's wrapped around your spine. And she said it's effectively above her pay grade. And that started one of the longest days of my life. I had to go straight to St. Vincent's Hospital. I was connected with the right doctors and the right team, or what I thought was the right team. And then by about 5 or 6 p.m. that evening, my wife, who'd been by my side most of the day and been in tears most of the day, and we sat in front of 3 doctors. And the very first doctor, the first thing she ever said to me, and I'd never met this person before in my life, she just looked at me and said, well, Barry, my best advice is to go home, tidy up your affairs, spend as much time as you can with your loved ones. You've got about 3 months to live. And I said to her, well, yeah, I'm afraid you don't know me and I don't know you, but I said, I'm stronger than that narrative. And if you're not prepared to give me a little bit more latitude than that, I'd rather you leave the room. I'm not interested in having you in. If this is my team, I don't want you in the team. And with the hierarchy of medicine, she thought that was preposterous that I said that. And she sort of just looked at me across the desk and said, I'm not joking. I don't want someone like you in the room. And as she walked out, I said to the next guy, you don't know my story, but I know that I've come in here with a bad headache and I won't have anybody else narrate my story. I said, if you're prepared to do your best, I'm prepared to do my best. But I'm not going to give up because someone believes a statistic that I'm not interested in. And that person and the next person, because there was 3 doctors, they're still part of my team today. And that was a polarizing moment for me, and it was a moment where the world changed direction, if you will. And it was scary, and it was exhilarating, and it was surreal, all those things at once. And so that's what happened. That was the day I found out that I got cancer. And I've talked to you about this in the past. None of us planned to get cancer, but I also don't plan to die in a hurry. So just because my narrative has got another word in it doesn't mean I'm going to change my plans to suit your narrative.
That's really interesting that you took that stand, given the fact that you're obviously in that moment and you'd be probably suffering from shock. But where do you think that ability to actually have that self-confidence to make sure that you were the one that was advocating for yourself and you were responsible for your narrative? Because that isn't the normal story that we hear.
No, it's not, because we look at the world as a hierarchy as well. And too often we allow others to dictate our story. And it's really interesting for me. I've put a lot of thought into this in hindsight, so I'll explain it in hindsight. I'm dyslexic, so I don't read and write very well, although I have gotten better since I started writing and since I started TV particularly, that the medium is fantastic for someone like me. You can just express thoughts and editors can capture those thoughts and present them beautifully. So, I know what I want to say inside and I say it, and with the help of editing and stuff, that can be a really powerful message. But my point for telling you about the dyslexia was that when I was going to school, I believed in my heart, because my mum and dad were very supportive, that I was smart. And I was smart. I was very smart, as all children are, because we're developing. But when I try and write my thoughts down, the spelling and the grammar was so bad, it was hard for others to understand what I was trying to write down. So, and that used to be frustrating for me and obviously frustrating for my teachers, because I sort of in that system was labeled as a troublesome child. I was someone who just didn't fit the mold that makes it easy for the world. And I had to learn to do other things to make up for that. And I learned that I wasn't allowed to say the way I felt. I actually wasn't allowed to express the emotion and the self-belief and the other thoughts I had. I had to do my best to fit in that square box. I had incredibly strong parents who believed in our family and how special we were. So it was conflicting. Mum and dad are telling me, you can do anything you want, and teachers are telling me you're just an idiot. Literally in those days, that's what they'd say to you as well. So I had that. But I had a dad who was, back in those days, I mean, you're a lot younger than me, but back in the days, like when I was growing up, the 60s and 70s, the word resilience wasn't a word, it was a way of life. And parents in those days My mum made our clothes. My dad generally, or my grandfather and my dad built and our Christmas presents.
Oh,
You know, so I grew up in a family that had nothing, but were blessed with everything because of love and ability to not say no. So I had that. But interestingly enough, that's childhood, and this is a long story. As I went forward, I became an apprentice carpenter. I only had two choices. In those days, I had the choice of a apprentice carpenter or apprentice mechanic because one uncle was a carpenter, one uncle was a mechanic. And because
yeah.
I had no grades, that wasn't going to help me out at all. And so I became a carpenter, which was very creative for me, and it was a great outlet. I became very good at that very quickly. I found a real passion for design in that. And then because I'd made so many mistakes, I found out a way to, like you as a producer would do, just to create these lists and spreadsheets that I understood. Not everybody else understood them, but I understood them. And with that, I became a very successful businessman, and I had a design, construct, and development company. And I did really well at that. And my inner strength, my self-belief that mum and dad gave me really started to mature and really started to come to the forefront. So I was every bit the alpha male that I think all men want to be. I had a successful business. I had a beautiful wife. I was taking care of my parents. I was seen to be taking care of everybody, and I really loved that image. I loved the facade that I put up. Big, strong, powerful guy who could fix anything. And then what happened to me was I had a really bad accident, a physical accident. I fell 5 stories off a building. I broke my back in 3 places. I broke my leg in a couple of places, popped the shoulder, broke these 2 fingers. So physical injury is something if you don't treat it mindfully, can really affect you. And I think you know that. I mean, you've been through that yourself. So that started to eat away at me. And because it ate away at my strong, beautiful facade that I'd created, that started to emotionally affect me inside. So when people would say, how's your back? I'd say, my back's fine. Don't worry about it. I was in agony, but I was saying, don't worry about me. And not long after that, my beautiful mum lost her fight with cancer in 2004. She'd been fighting for quite a while. And again, that emotion of grief, I didn't handle that well either, because again, that looked like another dent in my alpha male status facade. And I wouldn't let that come in. I said, I'm fine. I didn't cry at my mum's funeral. I refused to show the emotion that was inside. I think a lot of that came from my school days, but I refused to show that. And again, when you don't treat these things properly, they will start to eat away, and you will start a negative bias conversation in your own mind. And because Leonie and I had been married for a couple of years now, we'd been trying to have children, and we were struggling with that. And we'd had several attempts of IVF. Again, when you tell people you're pregnant and they're excited for you, and all of a sudden the picture looks perfect again, but then you have a miscarriage. And then for us, we had 12 miscarriages, but after about 6 or 7 miscarriages, I stopped sharing that because, again, it was more and more failures. Do you see what I mean? So the facade looked really good, but on the inside, I was getting beaten right up. And 12 months after Mum passed away, I was laying in bed and I heard that very familiar scream from the ensuite. And I knew that the pregnancy we had going at that moment, which was at that time, we were 17 weeks with twins. I knew that was over. We'd listened to heartbeats and we'd looked at ultrasounds, but I knew that was over. And again, rather than acknowledge the pain that was there, I just kept ignoring it. And I won't take you too far into that, but in the end, I crashed. That negative bias conversation took me to a place where I thought end of life was going to be the best thing for everybody around me. I didn't want them to see that I was failing them. And I want you to understand this, as an alpha male, I believed not controlling things that weren't in my control was a fault of mine. And I was taking ownership of all these problems. I took ownership of my mum losing her battle with cancer. I took ownership of my wife miscarriaging. I took ownership of Leonie on the 12th miscarriage, getting cervical cancer. And I just thought, it seems that everything you touch goes to shit. And you'd be better off, and everybody around you'd be better off if you just weren't here. So that's a really summarized version of a really dark time of my life. And thankfully, a friend, on the night that I had decided it'd be best if I took my life, someone contacted me, and they wouldn't let go, so to speak. When they were talking to me on the phone, my emotions overcame me, and they effectively just drove to where I was. And I was so far down a dark hole, it wasn't funny. And by that person coming and insisting that we sit together and talk, and he just held me, quite frankly, that was the micro step it took to start building back my strength again. So I hope that's not too upsetting for anybody, but going to the depths of that type of depression and then having that first micro step out of that dark valley, and then the thousands of micro steps that follow that, that's what gives me the resilience I have today. That's why when a doctor says you're going to die in 3 months, I can say, yeah, thanks for your opinion, but go away. I've beaten better than this already. So you don't know me. You don't know who I am. And that's where the resilience came from. It was a lifetime. We all get our resilience from the way we approach adversity through our life. I approached it the wrong way for about 3 or 4 years, and that resulted in a really depressed state. And thankfully, through human connection and care and conversation, I started my way out of that valley. And as a result, I like to think I'm an expert on leaning into adversity and creating resilience.
Barry, how much do you think at that moment when you're sitting in front of that panel of those 3 doctors and you're told to go home and get your affairs in order, you've got 3 months to live?
Yeah.
Given the fact that this was around about sort of 7 years after your mum had died and that very dark period in your life, how much of the role of a support network provided you with a base to sit there and say that?
When I got to my darkest point, I'd rejected all support. And this is what people that are going through mental health illnesses do, or issues do. They reject help. They think that everybody else just doesn't understand them. That's how I felt. I felt that no one understood my plight, and they couldn't understand it because they're not me and they don't know what I'm going through. So, like, as I said, what saved my life that night, that Thursday night, was someone reaching out with a hunch that there was something more wrong than I was telling everybody. So that was a micro step. I might not have realized it that night, but I do now. That micro step of human connection, and I realize is so strongly now, is the foundation for eternal strength. If you're connected, if there's someone standing beside you and you're connected to someone else, you are stronger than a single being. It's as simple as that. And so support, it's not that I allow support network around me now. It's just a part of the pie chart of my life. Human connection, the curiosity to be better in every way. That means be a better friend, be a better listener, be a better communicator, be a better father, be a better husband. That creates support within your own life. So, all the things that went wrong when mum passed away, when Leonie got cancer, I didn't accept help back then. And I realized in hindsight is a great thing, that support and human connection is one of the strongest medicines there are.
And tell me, Leonie's cancer, how was that to be the one standing beside someone else and supporting them?
Yeah, well, I didn't do anywhere near as good a job as I could have. I just kept saying to her, you'll be okay. I explain it like this, and this will reference some of my courses. It's no sense me telling you what I did, because what I did necessarily wasn't right, and it didn't help her that much, and it definitely didn't help me. But since then, and it's why I share what I do, I realize that there's 3 types of conversation. There's a social conversation, there's an empathetic conversation, there's a solution-based conversation. Most alphas and most mums, most people who are carers, they want to go straight to a solution-based conversation. And that's what I did for Leonie. What Leonie needed from me was an empathetic conversation. I can't change the fate of her cancer journey. All I can do is listen to how she feels and do what I can do to support her. What I did back then was say, what we need to do is this. I'm going to take control of that. I'm going to do this. Well, it's better off if the doctors do that and you support her with those things. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does make sense to me. And it's very typical of some of the stories that I hear.
Yeah. If you love someone, you want to fix their problems straight away. 9 out of 10 times, you will help a lot more if you just listen to them. And that's true connection. Listening intently. As you know, I'm on the board of directors of Are You OK Day, and it's a very important movement to me. And we say, listen with your heart through your ears, and then offer support and obviously follow up down the track. It's a really important sequence of events.
And so you mentioned there that perhaps what you've done in your guides and your talks and the resources that you've developed and provide now are based on that ability to look at your behavior and your actions in hindsight.
Yeah, my lived experience is the best lesson I can pass on. I frame myself as a modern day elder. I share the stories of my lifetime so that the young warriors, female and male warriors of our tribe, can be better prepared for the hurdles that I know are going to come their way. 1 in 2 people in this world are going to get cancer. You know, I want you to be as prepared for that as possible, because when my mum got cancer, and this had a profound effect on me, in hindsight, I can see that the doctors and the staff and everybody, and even our family to an extent, just said, okay, they've said she's going to die. She's going to die. I believed if my mum today got that cancer, there's no way she would die, because so many people gave up on her. She just went on the what do I call it? The Trevolator to death. You know what I mean? She just kept thanking everybody for her life. And there was no sense that she would ever thrive again after treatment. In fact, I don't even believe the doctors thought she survived the treatment. So it's just so important to have a belief system there that you can do better. And if you're forever being curious on how you can do better, you'll always do a little bit better. It's as simple as that.
Given the amount of insight that you have with your own personal experience, through, 2 different diagnoses, obviously Leonie, your mum, things that you've experienced also where you've supported other people and you've heard stories. What are the gaps that you've identified, Barry?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it's obvious. Well, it's not. I was going to say that, somewhat individual, but it's not. The gaps are this. It's the person that relays that information every single day of their life. The person receiving that information receives that information once, twice at best in their life, and they haven't spent a second of their life preparing for it, which makes sense. I mean, who wants to prepare for a shocking diagnosis? But what I do is, not in my guides, but what I do in my personal life, I say to myself every day, this afternoon, if I have to step into the ring, am I prepared? And I will make time in the day, might only be 30 or 40 minutes, but to do a couple of micro things that will make me more prepared if I have to get in the ring this afternoon. And as you said, in some of the resources I offer, that's what I found is breath work really helps. Meditation, physical exercise, nutrition, just simple mindset exercises. But as well as that is understanding your own personal boundaries, because when you understand boundaries, you have a tighter group of people around you. They're not people that are there just to fill in numbers. They're there because they matter. And I think those top 5 people in your life are really important, to have that top 5 that know everything that's happening to you. and you can share the burden of the ups, and you can share the successes of share the burdens of the downs, and share the successes of the ups with those people, and they become closer to you, and they, like you, become more prepared for whatever comes your way.
And was that challenging for you? Because I'm assuming with your elevated profile comes a larger pool of audience, of acquaintances, a larger network. How did you work out who your five were, Barry?
Oh, I mean, our five comes naturally, and it changes as well. It changes through life. That's a really good question you just asked there, because I think about this, and as you know, I talk to a lot of people going through different journeys, and it's funny how often I hear stories of toxicity with ex-best friends. She used to be my best friend. He was once my best friend. And isn't it funny, because we put so much onus on one person. Now, I've got a best friend, make no mistake about that. But, you know, I've realized now, I mean, I didn't have my children until I'm 52 years old. And I used to be that guy saying to my mates who have got 3 kids, when are we going out? When are we going out? But the boys ask me now, because they're grandparents, when are we going out? I say, oh, mate, you forget what it's like. The kids are everything to me. So when the kids are everything to you, going out to the footy with your mates or going out for nights and that they're just not important. So obviously things are going to mold and change. But I want to say this, because you asked a question which is different for me than a lot of people. My second cancer came along in 2017. And that was a shock. There's no doubt about it. Because of my self-belief, I thought I'd beaten this cancer for sure. And when Dr. Sam told me it was back and it was a multiple myeloma, which is a lot worse than the original one, I was now a father of 2 beautiful twins. And I was in a place I was really enjoying. I was sitting alongside Amanda Keller on the living room couch, and I had my 2 great friends sitting in front of me, and we were just having the best time of our lives making that show. It's just a beautiful show. And the second person I told about the cancer diagnosis was Amanda. And she said to me, if you believe you're going to be okay, I believe it too. She said, if it was anybody else, I wouldn't have the same faith. But if you say that you're going to make it, I'm with you. So, and, we discussed then after that, sharing that with our audience, because she said, and I said it to her, this treatment is tough. I'm going to go to the depths of the darkest depths, And I said, but I am going to come back and I'm going to thrive again. And I said, I think that's just something we could share with our audience and show them. I wanted to show them what no one showed my mum, that you can get cancer and you can live every day of your life the best way you can live it. You shouldn't live it thinking you're about to die. No one has the right to tell you that. I don't care if it's a week, a month, or 10 years. If you believe that you're living your best life for that amount of time, you live your best life. And that's what I wanted to show the audience. And we were a little bit nervous at the start, and I announced that live on TV. And a really beautiful thing has happened to me ever since that moment. I wouldn't go a week in my life where I don't have people come up to me in the street or send me a message or a Facebook post to say, my dad was going through cancer while you were on TV. And every week you showed up, it gave him strength, or it gave her strength. And that's an incredible gift to be given, to be told by people that you empowered their journey. And so many of them say they're thriving now. They wouldn't have believed they could have, but you gave them that self-belief. So, you're right. My network is huge. I'm embraced, and I embraced hundreds of thousands of people that are going through a similar journey to mine. And thankfully, up to today, I've lived every day the best way I can, and I've shared that journey so that others can believe that they can do the same.
I remember that moment that you spoke about your return of your cancer on the living room. That was such a powerful moment in television history.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting. I get emotional talking to you about it now. And it's funny, back in 2006, when we were going through those miscarriages and my mum's passing and Leonie's cancer, I didn't get emotional like this. And something I want to share with your listeners is that I'm much stronger alpha male now than I was. Not because I'm vulnerable. I'm not even fussed on that word vulnerable, but because I'm brave enough to share my emotions. And I think that's a really important message, particularly for men, but for women as well. Bravery isn't hiding your emotions, it's sharing your emotions. And you need resilience, and through sharing comes resilience. And to gain resilience, we have to lean into things that are tough. There's no doubt about it. We've got, before TV or any of these things, the two things I was scared of was failing and public speaking. Now I speak most days about failing and how that empowered me.
And what's interesting is that you talk about the fact that the two things is failure and public speaking.
Mm.
But the one thing that's remained at the core is the ability for you to actually have hold of your own narrative and the direction that it goes.
Yeah, definitely.
And tell me, if we can just step back to the fact that you became a dad at the age of 52, how did you and Leonie have the courage to decide again to try to become parents?
Yeah, well, Leonie never gave up. Leonie's the most resilient woman I've ever met in my life. She's a rock. She believed in us, even when I didn't. She believed in the strength of us. And through that, she stood beside me to give me the strength to try again. And after our 12th miscarriage, Leonie got cervical cancer. So we lost the ability to naturally have children, or what's the word for it? Common way. We went on the adoption trail for a couple of years, but because Leonie had cancer, that was never going to happen. They weren't going to allow us to adopt. And then we discovered surrogacy. And interestingly enough, we had 7 attempts of surrogacy as well. And each hurdle, each heartbreak, each emotional letdown just gave us more resilience. And we knew how hard it was, and we knew we could take it. So we tried again. And leaning into adversity gives you the muscle of resilience, and that gives you the strength to live. And all those things, and a whole lot of love and a whole lot of support. The result was my beautiful twins.
And you've turned this lived experience not only into a story that you tell others so other people can learn from your experience, but you've also developed some really insightful resources that give insight that don't normally, get discussed. So the ones that I'm specifically referring to is, the Caregiver's Compass. So that's obviously...
That's a free resource, on my website. Yeah.
That's looking at it from a caregiver's perspective, which a lot of people forget in the equation.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was effectively as a caregiver, and I failed because, I didn't set boundaries, and that's what the Caregiver's Compass is all about. It's just understanding that you need to give yourself some love. You need to fill your own tank because you can't pour from an empty cup. So setting boundaries, giving yourself moments of kindness and self-love, understanding the difference between not working and failure. There's a whole lot of things there. And I do a lot of work with the Caregivers Gateway through Benevolent Society as well. They're incredible people, just magnificent people. And because I get to meet so many carers, so many of them are burnt out and exhausted. And that's not helping anyone. And so many of them were like me. It's that they want to control everything, and they want to be the key helper. Having someone else help isn't a failure. It's just lessening the load on both of you, therefore increasing what can be done and the benefit of the person that you're caring for. So that's the Caregivers Gateway. The other, I've got a couple more. I'll pitch them now, if you will, but it's the Cancer Patient's Guide to Parenting. I've said this to you in the past. I know that no one plans to get cancer. No one plans, so they haven't got a roadmap for that. And I know what it was like the second time when my kids were a part of my life then, and I was going to have to go home from the hospital and then navigate explaining that to them, that Dad was going to lose his hair and Dad was going to have to spend a month in hospital and they weren't going to be able to visit him and stuff like that. And working with psychologists on that particular one and other parents, because I coach a lot of people going through their own cancer journey, it's different for teenagers. It's different for younger children. And you've got to learn how to speak on their level at those points, making sure that they're not getting information that isn't going to help the situation. Like, yeah, there's no sense explaining to a kid that you've got a plasmacytoma myeloma or multiple myeloma. No, daddy's sick and the doctors are going to give him some medicine and he's going to spend some time in the hospital where he's safe, and how to speak to those things. We all have our own language, but I just set a guide for that. I've also set a guide that I think is really important. If I will, I call it the big C. It's the preparation from the first 30 days. You've been diagnosed, and just simple things at the back there. My daily steady session, it's what will I do? What will I focus on today? What's one small action I'm going to take to steady my mind? What's the one thing I'm going to do to support my body today? Because it's so easy to go down this negative bias track of what's it matter? I may as well eat rubbish now. So many people I've heard, they indulge in all the things because they believe it's over. But no, we don't indulge in those things and we prepare ourselves. We're about to go through the hardest treatment you're ever going to go through. So now's the time to get ready. Who's my support group? Who's going to come with me to the doctor? In here, just a simple thing as well. Just a list of questions. The amount of times that I walked out of the doctor's surgery, Leonie and I were on the way home when she was going through cancer, when Mum was going through cancer, when I was going through cancer. I wanted to ask him about that. Remember, we said we were going to talk about that. Just simple things like that. So in the preparation for treatment, I've got areas where you write those questions in and the doctors are happy to share that information as well. That's a really important one. And I've got my signature course is the 5 days to a calmer, stronger you. And that's a bigger course and that's a paid course, but that comes with a whole bunch of videos, comes with a workbook and just allows you first and foremost to set your own boundaries, to support yourself with love and kindness, to become mindful. There's a guided breath work in that as well. There's a whole bunch of stuff if you go to the website. And I think I mentioned to you, I will drop a code in your
in the show notes, in
the show notes there. So, and they can get a bit of a discount on that stuff.
That's very generous of you, Barry. But what strikes me is that you've provided support guides in areas that aren't normally spoken of, recognizing the important role that unpaid care has when something like this happens and how there's very little support for people who are, the one that is the unpaid carer that's supporting someone.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the fact that continuity of care from, that moment when you get that diagnosis and you're sitting there in front of those 3 doctors to the days, weeks or months that comes after waiting for the treatment appointments.
And I mean, there's so much we could talk about that. I mean, the amount of times that I've had these meetings with doctors and I walk out and I don't know a thing they've said. I can't remember a single word. I don't know what drug I'm going to be on. I don't know. I know he said something about the 15th of April. That's what I know. Your brain isn't wired to take that sort of information. And so I know that. But it's also just what you were saying that, and this is also important. My mum was a gem. It was so funny. If she didn't care how much she did for someone else, just so long as she was doing something for someone else, that was a real key part of her life. And I remember she started up the cancer support group in Sussex Inlet where she lived. And she just created a network where if you had to go to hospital for a treatment or whatever, there might be someone who can drive you. And that might be that opportunity for that partner to have a break from it. Do you know what I mean? So it's just thinking about that. And the caregivers, the gateway, they do so much of that. It's just help with transport so that your primary carer can get a break, and stuff like that.
And it seems to be that at the center of all of the resources and your experience, that it seems to be making sure you ask the questions and you have informed
Yeah.
resources, support networks around you. What do you recommend to someone if they find themselves in a situation where they are diagnosed? You look at life in a very holistic manner in how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
What are the first, few things that you'd suggest to them to do?
Oh, well, it's all there in the guide, of course, but it all comes down to this. Forever be curious on how you can do better. I will say to you now openly, breath work to me is something I do breath work at least 15 times a day. It's just a 3-minute breath work. I did it before we did this podcast. I'll probably do it after this podcast and I'll make some notes after I've done the breath work. But breath work, nutrition is incredibly important. When it comes to cancer, the treatment for cancer is horrific. So get your gut in the best shape it's in, because the better shape it's in, the better it's going to come back after the treatment destroys it, because that's what's going to happen. The treatment for most cancers destroys your gut health. So you, as a holistic human, won't be able to fight the cancer until your gut is in its back into fighting mode, back ready to get in the ring again. So the better it is before you go into the treatment, the quicker it's going to be for you to get back where it's got to be. Again, just lean on your support group. Let them know that any help is good help, and just take notes for everything. I mean, those 4 things are really basic, but they will go a long way. But without doubt, and this is the main thing, and I really want to look straight at you when I say this, believing you are going to thrive after the treatment turns this really negative moment into a stepping stone to a positive place. It doesn't matter if it's a year or 10 years. Live every second the best way you can. Living, loving, caring for yourself, caring for others with empathy and joy and love. And whatever the length of your life, you're going to live your best life. And that's all you can ask for.
I think that's really beautiful, Barry. When you refer to getting in the ring, what are you referring to?
Just that. Every single day. I've been a competitor my whole life. I've stepped into the boxing ring. I played footy. I was an athlete. And Larry Bird, the basketball player, said that you can't go and practice hoops Saturday morning for a game Saturday afternoon. Every day. And this is the gift of getting cancer. See, I say it like this. We're all living in the river of life. We're all floating down this river of life. Sometimes you go over some eddies or rapids. Maybe you go over a bit of a waterfall. Sometimes you're in these big, beautiful lakes and the sunshine's just shining on you and it's perfect. Some other times, other people are in the river with you. But what happened to me when they told me I had 3 months to live, what I got to see, and I wish everybody could see this without having to go through what I went through, but what you see is what I call the waterfall of mortality. I see when I get to that point, that lady said it was 90 days away. I'm going to go off the edge and there's no coming back. So what you do is you start paddling backwards as hard as you can. Now, you can't fight the rapids. So what you do is you look for things that are just going to give you 1 extra meter. You look to get rid of things that aren't helping you fight the current. You look to spend time with the things that give you the most joy. And those 3 basic things, but, just understanding that this is a river of life. And, what was your question again?
It doesn't really matter, Barry, because you lost me when you actually gave me the waterfall of mortality and you had me on that raft, because that is an amazing and very beautiful imagery.
Getting into the ring is what you said. And
Yeah.
so what I say, for me getting in the ring, what that means, every single day I push myself into some adversity, because, if you don't lift any weights, your arms aren't going to get any bigger. If you don't face adversity, your resilience won't get stronger. When you step into the ring, if your resilience is at its best, and you faced a whole lot of adversity, even money, to beat the champion. You know, if you're at your best, you've won the fight. That's my opinion. So breath work, food, these conversations mean so much to me too, because I hope that out of this conversation, it'll strengthen my society a little bit. And when you've got 13-year-old twins and you live with a blood disease like I do, I'm not going to be around forever. I know that. So every day, one of the little things I do, apart from my breath work, apart from my nutrition, my exercise, I try and strengthen my society so that my children will be able to grow up in a society that they can thrive in, even if I'm not here. See, if I'm not here, I want to know, like if I'm on my deathbed and I think, this society is terrible, is not the best it could be because I didn't work on it, I'm letting them down. So it's just all these little micro things. Like I said, talking to you is a micro step forward for the future of my children. So that gives me strength.
That is a beautiful way to look at your legacy, Barry.
Well, we can all leave legacy, and I think it's important to leave legacy, as big or as small as it is. If you've done something good, it's not a hard investment, is it? I even say this: I smile at people. I smile at just about everybody that goes past. It's a tiny little investment, and then 8 out of 10 times someone will smile back. To me, that's a great dividend. I'm an investor, so I invest in really easy things for simple returns. Talking to you is a simple investment, and it'll give a beautiful return of a strength in society. Hopefully someone's listening to this might be going through their own journey and they think, I can do this because he did it. It doesn't cost me anything. And I think monetarily or holistically, there's a great return.
Well, I think that your story has really provided such insight to a side of life that we don't normally get to experience. And also, a side that has been very publicly displayed in sometimes your very worst moments. So thank you so much for spending time with us, Barry.
It's a pleasure. I will say this because you just triggered me there. If everybody was told they had 90 days to live, or ask yourself, if someone told you you had 90 days to live, what would you do differently? Because that's what you should be doing. That's how you should be living your life.
I think we couldn't end the conversation any more powerfully than just that. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you very much. Good luck to everybody.
Don't be caught dead forgetting to subscribe. And here are some more videos we know you'll love.